Welcome to Tabernacle Talk. Tabernacle Talk is a Bible study podcast brought from Tabernacle Baptist Church in Essex, Maryland. I'm your host, Brian Self. We hope this podcast encourages you to know Christ, grow in His Word, and show His love to others. Let's dive right in. Welcome back to Tabernacle Talk. Today we are in the last half of Isaiah chapter 6, and last episode we saw Isaiah sees a glimpse of the throne room of God. He sees the angels, the seraphim, that are flying around God's throne. They're proclaiming, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of armies. His glory fills the whole earth." We saw that even the foundations of the doorways shook at the sound of the angel voices, and the temple was filled with smoke. Isaiah recognized his state before God. He says, "Woe is me, for I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lips and live among a people of unclean lips." When we encounter God, truly, our response is we are sinful. We are unworthy of this incredible, good, holy, just, perfect, loving God. But we then read in verse number 6, then one of the seraphim flew to Isaiah, and in his hand was a glowing coal that the angel had taken from the altar with tongs. He touched Isaiah's mouth with it and said, "Now that this has touched your lips, your iniquity is removed and your sin is atoned for." If you will, from the altar of God, from that place of forgiveness, forgiveness was extended from heaven to Isaiah. It wasn't that Isaiah earned it, but that he received it. Same as we have today, that from that altar that Jesus applied his blood to as he ascended into heaven, as we read in Hebrews 9 and 10, we receive forgiveness from heaven. Now, verse number 8, Isaiah has a purpose, a responsibility. He has excitement as he has encountered God and has received forgiveness from him. It leads him to do, to believe, to say something. And we can see this in verse number 8. Then I heard the voice of the Lord asking, "Who will I send? Who will go for us?" I said, "Here I am. Send me." So God is wanting to send a messenger out to the world. And those that have truly experienced the forgiveness and the grace of God, those who have seen God's grandeur, will want to tell other people about what they have found. If you go, "I have no desire to ever talk about my relationship with God or what God's done for me or how God is moving in my life. I have no desire to talk to anyone else about that." My friend, I want to challenge you. It may be that you are not a Christian. Those that truly do encounter God cannot help but talk about what they have seen and heard. That's what we read the apostles telling the Sanhedrin, the ruling Pharisees and Sadducees there in Jerusalem in the first century, even as they were being beaten for saying what they believed about Jesus. They say, "We cannot help but speak about the things that we have seen and heard." The women that went to the empty tomb of Jesus, as we'll celebrate on Sunday, those women couldn't help but go and tell the disciples about what they had seen. If it is real in us, we will want it to be real for others. Does that mean that we won't experience fear? No, we'll definitely experience fear. Does it mean that we will have no situational awareness about how we say it or when we say it or where we say it or how loudly we say it? No, there are many, many things that will play into what that looks like in our life. But do you have any desire to tell other people about the Lord? Here Isaiah says, "Here I am. Send me. I will be the one that speaks on behalf of God to the people." Verse number 9, and God replied, "Go. Say to these people, keep listening, but do not understand. Keep looking, but do not perceive. Make the minds of these people dull. Deafen their ears and blind their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears, understand with their minds, turn back and be healed." Here, what God is instructing Isaiah is, I want you to go and I want you to preach to these people, but I want you to know they will not listen to you. They are not going to listen to my words. And though I am giving you a message from this heavenly throne room, it is only going to result in them turning more deaf ears to what God is saying. This is like with Pharaoh. I think I've mentioned it several times on the podcast. It's a helpful word picture for me, that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, that this same sun that melted the heart of Isaiah, that his heart was like ice, that when the sun shines on the ice, it melts. That was Isaiah's heart, versus the heart of Pharaoh, that when God commanded him to do things, he did not listen and obey. Instead, he insisted on his own will, his own way. And so his heart was like clay, that when the sun shines on the clay, it hardens up. And so here, that's what God is saying for Isaiah. These people are not going to believe. They are not going to obey. And so actually, John the Apostle quotes this particular portion of Scripture for Palm Sunday. As Jesus comes into Jerusalem, we would read this in the end of John 12 and verse number 39. He says, "This is why they were unable to believe, the people that heard Jesus' preaching but did not respond in faith to it." It says, "This is why they were unable to believe, because Isaiah also said, he has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, so that they would not see with their eyes or understand with their hearts and turn, and I would heal them." Isaiah said these things because he saw his glory and spoke about him. And so here, John the Apostle draws this picture from the Old Testament to say Jesus is the ultimate fulfillment of all of the rest of Scripture. And so if this was true in the ministry of Isaiah, it would be even more true in the ministry of Christ. That as Jesus preached all across Israel for 3 years, that it did not result in widespread like revival and turning to God. Some people certainly did, and what a joy. You can think to the apostles, you can think of the 70, you can think of even that group of over 500 that saw him at one time post-resurrection. You can think of all of the women that followed Jesus and tended to needs, that there were people that followed, but many people, they turned a deaf ear. They would not receive what God had said. And so Isaiah then asks in verse 11, until when, Lord? Like, how long am I supposed to be preaching to these people that will totally reject everything that I am saying? That even as I'm preaching a great, wonderful message of redemption and hope, that God says, no, all this is going to do is seal their fate as a result of their lack of desire to listen to me. And God says, and there in verse 11, so Isaiah says, how long am I preaching this message of, it's a good message, but everyone's turning a deaf ear to it. And he says, and God says, you are to preach this until cities lie in ruins without inhabitants. Houses are without people. The land is ruined and desolate, and Yahweh drives the people far away, leaving great emptiness in the land. Though a tenth will remain in the land, it will be burned again, like the terebinth or the oak that leaves a stump when felled. The holy seed is the stump. So here God says, Isaiah, you're going to keep on preaching this. This is the message from God to Israel. This isn't a message for 1 week. It's not for 5 years. Isaiah would preach this message until his death. And then even after his death, you'd still have 50 to 100 years before the prophecy would come true. Isaiah preached all his life a message of a coming judgment that would not come during his time, but would come after his time. It was a message that was not popular. Even history would tell us that Isaiah would likely have been sawed in half by the very last king of Judah during Isaiah's lifespan. That he would be sawed in half as a result of the hatred of that king for the message of Isaiah. Many people think Isaiah is specifically the man mentioned in Hebrews 11, that some of the prophets that had faith in God were, in the words of the old King James, sawn asunder or cut in half as a result of their faith in the Lord. And I want to ask you, if you never saw God's promises take place within your lifetime, would you still believe in him and follow him? Would you repent and turn to the Lord even if the prophesied judgment did not come during your lifetime? So much of what I hope to accomplish as a Christian and as a pastor is planting seeds for trees that I will never see. My prayer is that Tabernacle, we're 76 years old right now. My prayer is that Tabernacle would last at least another 76 years. I want it to far outlast me. And again, this is probably not, well, actually, no, this could be practical for some of you. One of the very first things that we did as a church when I came here was to do an update of our constitution and bylaws. It really needed a workover, and the church knew that. They had already voted on the Constitution Review Committee and all of that. But so much of what we worked through together as a Constitution Review Committee was setting up systems for someday, setting up the system for what that process looks like to get a new pastor, what the process looks like if a pastor sins and fails and the church has to deal with it, how to deal with abuse within the church. And my prayer is that all of those things that I set up will be wonderful for a someday that, I won't ever have to vote in the new pastor of Tabernacle. Like, I won't have to be the one that finds him. But my prayer is that what I planted will then help and benefit someone else later. Can I ask you, in your Christian life, are you planting seeds now for someone else's someday? This is what Isaiah is doing. He's warning them because there would come that day of judgment. And so he needed to be faithful now to warn them so that they wouldn't have to experience the judgment later. Maybe if you are listening to this, you're not really sold out on the whole Christianity thing. You're not really sold out on the whole church thing. I want part of my ministry to be to warn you, though I may not know every single one of you personally. I want to warn you about the coming judgment, that one day Jesus will return to judge the living and the dead. And that could happen, even as I'm recording this, or it could happen 2,000 years from right now. I don't know when the day is, but I want to faithfully preach. That might make me look stupid in the meantime, that people go, well, where is this Jesus? And for 2,000 years, people have been saying, oh yeah, Jesus will come back. Well, where in the world is he? He hasn't told me the day or the hour. No one on earth knows the day or the hour in which the Son of Man will return. But I want to be faithful to proclaim that coming judgment day. And I want to be faithful to love and to care for others now, so that hopefully one day my son or my daughter's spouse are the recipient of seeds that I planted now, of kindness, of love, of respect, of generosity, that then their spouse is changed, or their let me rephrase my sentence real quick, because I got lost as I was saying it. I want to raise my kids to be good spouses, and planting that seed so that one day Brian or Evelyn's spouses, they will experience a better life, as a result of what I have input into my kids. Or, if you're someone, at a church, I encourage you, if you have the ability, have the desire, serve in kids ministry. And it could be that kid that you teach about the gospel or about kindness in Sunday school, one day they might be able to teach someone else, or they might be able to lead someone else to the Lord as a result of the fact that they saw Jesus's love and his kindness be so real in you. Are you willing to plant seeds for trees that you will never get to sit under the shade of? I think there's just a lot of wonderful truths in there from Isaiah's preaching. Also, don't measure the effectiveness or the faithfulness of your ministry by what other people do in response to it. So you can take that in a bad way. I could be the most obnoxious, annoying, unhygienic, worst speaker in the world, and then try to say, okay, well, I'm being really faithful just to preach the gospel, and so not my fault if no one wants to come to my church, and if no one wants to be around me, like I'm just preaching faithfully. Well, there could be some things that I'm doing that are actively deterring people from the gospel. But here, as with Isaiah, he's preaching the message that God gave him, and God tells him people will not respond well to it. You can think about Jesus, that there were the times all throughout his ministry where people rejected him, and it was not as a result of any imperfection in Jesus. Just sometimes God's message is not received by those that hear it. It always accomplishes what God sends it out to do. Sometimes God sends his word to change people. Sometimes God sends his word to harden people's hearts, that they would have a just condemnation as a result of the fact that they received the message of God, or that they heard the message of God but did not receive it. So don't think, okay, I've genuinely been faithfully witnessing to this person for 20 years, and I must be doing something wrong because they're not saved yet. No, it could be that the purpose God has you in sharing your faith is that they will one day receive a righteous, a just condemnation because they were told the gospel and did not receive it. Or it could be that in God's time, in God's way, they might eventually accept it. But don't base faithfulness off of fruit, because you don't know what kind of fruit that God is going for. That doesn't excuse us to be ungodly in the way that we interact with others, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to avoid deterring people from the gospel through failures or flaws in us, but don't base faithfulness on fruit. Then the very last thing that I want to mention from this passage is in verse number 13. Though a tenth of the nation will remain in the land, it will be burned again, like the terebinth or the oak that leaves a stump when felled. The holy seed is the stump. And so this seed here, much like the branch that we heard about a couple chapters ago, is a topic that will pop up a couple more times in Isaiah, and even in chapter 7, we're going to see Emmanuel being talked about, God with us. And so this branch of Israel that is left, a surviving portion of the kingdom, is going to bring out life and that eternal kingdom that God promised to David. It will come through the Messiah. And so here the Messiah's line would not be snuffed out. There's only a stump left of this great tree that was once the southern kingdom of Judah. But in that stump is the holy seed, that seed of the woman that will crush the head of the serpent, the seed of Abraham who would receive the blessing and who would be a blessing to all the nations of the world. this is the one that Israel is looking for. That even though there is harsh judgment that is coming, even though many people will not receive the message of God, yet God is still working for the redemption of mankind through the descendants of Judah. This is I got to tell you guys, over the last 3 episodes, it's all been really tough, really heavy stuff. But what a joy that God does forgive, that God does have hope even in hard circumstances. Next episode, we're going to look at Isaiah 7. I'm really looking forward to this. I preached a message on Isaiah 7 several years ago now. I'll probably end up linking the sermon in the show notes on that particular episode, but looking forward to that. Have a wonderful Easter. If you are listening to this on the day it comes out, it's Good Friday, and looking forward to seeing what the Lord does during this Easter time. God bless.